Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hedge School of Farming. I have a guest today, Leslie Dwyer from Apsbioag. And hi, Leslie. How are you?
Hi, Brita. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming on. This is great. Love the solutions, the solution aspect to farming. But tell us about where you started your company and how you got started and all that.
Okay. I suppose I've worked in agriculture since I was 25. And when I originally started out, Brita, I started out with companies that were dealing with natural solutions in farming, based around seaweed extracts, based around herbal approaches to animal and animal health and disease issues. At the time, the market wasn't really there. And I branched into nutrition. I worked in nutrition then for 15 years, but I always kept the leg in on the natural side of approaching problems, be that actually from an animal point of view, a soil point of view, and indeed a human point of view. And I was doing my own little, I suppose, research and learning in the background for the last 10, 15, 20 years. And I went out on my own in 2015, and I partnered with some international companies that have, I suppose, pioneered and blazed a trail in many countries worldwide in working with natural solutions to improve the biological aspect of what we're doing. Biological aspect in soils, the biological aspect in crop production, and the biological aspect of animal production. So I was lucky in that I think I picked some really good companies to work with. And they've been, I suppose, niche companies up till recently. But now with the explosion and the interest in soil health, and they've become more mainstream, and some of them are selling into 38 to 40 countries worldwide. So they have quite a big market built up from a pretty small base when they started out.
Oh, great. And your own ABS, you started this company, you rebranded this year, was it? Or just
Yeah, I rebranded this year because I have several suppliers now from countries varying from Switzerland, Germany, New Zealand, the UK, US, Lithuania, and they all had their own brands, their own brand names, and it was becoming confusing for customers and confusing for me. So I want to bring it all under one banner because I mix and match different products depending on the circumstances I see at farm level and depending on what I think is needed. So I wanted to have them all under one brand. So there was coherence in the brand name and in the offering we were given to the marketplace. So we rebranded last year, just in around the start of COVID, and pulled all the products in under the Apsbioag brand. And yeah, so despite 2020 and all the knockbacks, it was we've had a good start. We've had a good year, and a lot of positivity, a lot of inquiries. There is a lot of there's a lot more awareness around soil health, and farmers are starting to sit up and take notice and ask questions, and they're looking for information. They're hungry for solutions.
Well, that's exactly what I've been doing a bit of research myself the last couple of years. And, Danu, that group that we just mentioned earlier, that, I came across them at the Biological Farm Conference and, read what they were doing. And I was always interested to follow them. And, especially when it comes to slurry, because slurry is probably one of the bigger issues on your regular traditional farm, because it's beef, dairy, obviously even more slurry to deal with, but we have a beef farm at home, and that's something that I was interested in. So we could just talk about the Slurry Pro for a minute, because just tell us how that works. Okay. and how people can get into it.
Okay. Well, I talk a little bit about slurry in general to start with, Breed, and then
go ahead.
Yeah. The product. Yeah, I suppose I think we underestimate the power of slurry in this country, because when you analyze slurry and you break it down, there's quite a lot of nutrients in it. In dairy slurry, they can be anything up to 60 units of nitrogen, phosphorus, potash, sulfur, and calcium, magnesium per 1,000 gallons of slurry. And soil has an ability, soil is like a cow's stomach. It has a limited capacity to digest what we put onto the soil. And slurry in its raw form, and when manure comes out the back end of a cow, her digestive system is sealed basically. There's no oxygen in there. It's an anaerobic environment. And there's biology all around us. There's biology in the soil, there's biology in the air, there's biology in our guts. And when an animal eats its feed, it passes through the gut. The aerobic or the oxygen species in that forage, that grass or silage or hay, whatever they're eating, go dormant. And the anaerobic or the species that don't need oxygen become more prolific. But when a cow is out in the field and the dung lands in the ground, those aerobic species that are dormant, suddenly they're surrounded with oxygen again. They can waken up. They can become more prevalent, and they help get the manure broken down along with dung beetles, worms, etc. Now, when slurry goes into a tank, it's a completely different story, because what happens is as it fills up, it layers obviously, and the oxygen is squeezed. Any oxygen that's in there is squeezed out. So the anaerobic bacteria and biology that's in the slurry stay prevalent. So they become the most prevalent species in the tank. And unfortunately, they break down some of the nitrogen into the likes of your ammonia, etc. They break down the sulfur into the dangerous slurry gas, which is the hydrogen sulfide. They break down some of the phosphorus. And so slurry in it coming out of a tank is completely different from slurry out in the field. And that makes it even more dangerous when we're applying it in terms of a human aspect, an animal aspect, but also when we apply it onto the soil. When you have these noxious compounds, Breda, they're detrimental to earthworms. And that's why back in our forefathers' time, when they were bedding on straw and rushes and whatever they had at the time, they never applied fresh farmyard manure onto fields. They always brought it to field in the days before nitrate regulations, and they left it cure for 2 years, because they knew in their wisdom and through experience that fresh farmyard manure, while it had lots of nutrients, it wasn't good for the soil. And it wasn't good for the soil because it was quite high in potash, it was quite high in nitrogen. And by letting it cure and compost and letting the worms into it, they ended up with less of the material, but it was much more potent because it didn't affect the biology. And so small amounts would go further. And they realized that, and I suppose we've forgotten about that. And the whole basis behind the Slurry Pro is to basically treat the slurry and put it into a form where it's similar to the cured farmyard manure from years ago. We're taking some of those noxious gases out of it. Some of the ammonia is converted back into ammonium, and we reduce the levels of hydrogen sulfide, etc. Now, you never get it to a level where it's safe. If you agitate the tank, you have to take the same precautions. But what we're doing is the Slurry Pro is what we class as a biological catalyst. It doesn't contain any enzymes. It doesn't contain any bacteria. It's basically formulated to wake up the native aerobic and anaerobic species that are on that farm, in that slurry, that come from that soil. So we're not bringing anything in from the outside. We want to work with the species of biology that are native in that farm that come from this country, because nature rules and we'll never top it. We have to work with it. So what it does is when you pour that into the tank, the catalyst itself bring the aerobic species out of dormancy. So they wake them up, they become more prevalent. We introduce species that we create species that will make a food source for the funguses, the beneficial funguses and the beneficial bacteria that we need. And they will start to draw air down into the tank. And by drawing air down into the tank, and they will grow. And what they will do is they'll restore a balance. So we start off with a very high level of anaerobic bacteria, and what we end up is a balance between aerobic and anaerobic in the tank. So we have a more natural, balanced fermentation occurring of the slurry rather than a rotting occurring of the slurry. So when you apply that slurry, we're putting on bacteria and funguses and archaea that are native to the farm. So when it lands on the grass, it lands on the soil, they don't get cannibalized by what's there already. In effect, they act as a feed source. So they feed the biology that's there naturally in the soil. And if you're doing that year after year after year, what you're doing is you're actually encouraging the biology to come back to life. And instead of knocking it, as we're doing with untreated slurry, we're actually helping the biology to grow. So your slurry as well as providing a good level of nitrogen and phosphorus and potash and sulfur and minerals and vitamins, it's also acting as a biological food source. And that's crucially important for us to help the soil to restore its biological activity. And crucially, when you do that, eventually help improve and restore soil structure.
That sounds that's incredible, because that's really what's needed. I mean, my father would often say that when he was younger, like, he'd shine a light on the field and he'd hear the thundering sound of all the earthworms going back in, and just not there anymore, and I suppose, because it's about waking up the dormant bacteria already in the soil. You're just giving it a, and the ingredients how did you actually come about to make the product? Was it soil tests and seeing what can be a catalyst, or is it all biology? Or
no, the product itself is manufactured by a European company. They're in the business about 30 years. Right. They are basically, I suppose, you'd nearly call them naturopaths and herbalists.
Okay.
The main couple behind it are qualified in naturopathy, and they have they actually started out their careers working with people and treating people with herbs, etc. And they're branched into agriculture, and they have pretty unique insights and technology to be able to develop products for specific problems. And actually, their first product they developed was for slurry treatment. And that was the very first product they developed over 30 years ago. So it's all based around encouraging natives, or native biology that's in our soil, that's in the atmosphere, and that's in our guts, that's in the animals' guts. It's all about causing them to basically express themselves fully rather than be subdued. So the product itself is around a long time, but it's only in the last really 5 years it's become more mainstream as more farmers look for solutions to slurry and manure problems.
Yeah, great, because it's something that, in terms of farming, like, it's the simple solutions, really, the domino effect, really, because that'll help. Again, yeah. Because I did a lot of research on the synthetic nitrogen, because I had for 10-10-20 the date just gone there. I was gonna the land is on drugs, because I was like, it seemed to me like it just, putting out the nitrogen feed the docks, and it's as much as it feeds, and a lot of it's run off, and it's just there's not really, it's almost like it goes round and round and nothing ever changes as such. So
yeah, it's interesting you say that, Breda, because the docks, like lots I heard lots that people say slurry causes docks, and I'm at the stage now where I'm telling farmers slurry doesn't cause docks. It's the compaction that's caused by the slurry and or the equipment we're using to apply it that causes dock seeds to germinate. Weeds, we have to see weeds for what they are, and weeds really are plants in the wrong places, but weeds are indicator plants, and a dock is telling us something. Every plant is telling us something, but if you've got docks in fields, they're telling you something. Like Tagus have research done, and their research has shown there's 60 to 70,000 dock seeds for every acre of ground in the country. So why is it that a dock will germinate in one little part of the field, and then you'll walk another 10 feet and you'll get a bit more? And basically, we have to understand that the biology in soil communicates. Biology has their own way, the same way in our gut they can communicate. And if you go out and you spread slurry and you spread it in less than ideal conditions, and it causes compaction basically will squeeze air out of soil, and suddenly the biology that's there, the aerobic bacteria that are there, you're squeezing the air that they need, so they actually send a signal out. And there is terms for describing how bacteria communicate. But they communicate, they send a signal out, and that signal hits the dock seed. And that dock seed will germinate with its sole aim to get a root down to aerate that soil. So basically, if we have fields with docks, we've got compaction issues, we've got a lack of air, and that's telling us that we need to address the structural problem. And what I've seen on farms that are taken the biological approach in the last number of years is slowly but surely, it takes time, Breda, dock levels drop in the fields. As they get that soil structure restored and get more air into the soil, the dock pressure lessens. And we have actually one farmer here not too far away from us in Kildare. He can get down his hands and knees, and slowly but surely he can pull the dock out of the ground with his bare hands. And what has happened his farm is the dock root itself has got narrower and it's got shallower. That was taken 3 or 4 years, but he hasn't used any sprays. And there's a lot of evidence around the country, anecdotal, that it may be from farmers that have gone down the biological route, that their weed pressure has got lower, particularly the docks over time, because docks is a sign of compaction, and you need to address that compaction, that structure issue, to basically get on top of it long term. Otherwise, we'll be spraying year after year after year.
Yeah, because it is that cycle again, the spraying, and then they come back again and again. You're not going to win. You said it earlier. Nature is she's the one.
Nature is king. Nature is king. Yeah.
Yeah.
We can't fight against it. No.
Exactly. It's better to work with it, and that's good because we've had great success so far. And we treated it 2 weeks ago now, or maybe 10 days ago, and he agitated it lately because he had to get rid of some, and he said there was no smell. So I don't know how long it takes to work, or how does, and when you put it in at the sides of the slurry, it kind of goes in itself towards the middle. Is that?
Yeah, once the product is diluted and it gets into the liquid portion of the slurry, Breda, it'll actually spread right throughout the tank within 24 hours.
Wow.
And it takes up to 2 months to get up to full speed for the first year, but the whole process actually improves year on year. Now, I got a beautiful picture from a customer during the week of his tank before he agitated it. Now it's full to the brim. But you look at it, and there was a bare skin, or we like to see a little skin or a little crust at the top. But literally his agitation's gone from 2 hours down to about 10 minutes this time of year. This is after the winter period. Now he's on it 3 years, so it improves year after year, and it kind of peaks about year 3. And that's why in year 2 we can cut our rates. Once we turn that tank over and we get it predominantly aerobic, it's much easier to keep it aerobic in year 2. The only stipulation on that is that there's no silage effluent getting into the tanks during the summertime, because silage effluent will do the same damage to slurry as it will to water, unfortunately, because it basically pulls the oxygen out of the slurry, and it'll annihilate all the beneficial bacteria and funguses that are in there. So then you have to go back to the full rate again. So we have farms that are treating their slurry very cost effectively, year 2, year 3, and their tanks take very, very little time to agitate. Plus as well, probably one of the big benefits is once you agitate it for that 10 or 20 minutes, it stays homogeneous for weeks. I have farms, it depends on the farm breed, it depends on the silage quality, it depends on the amount of silage that falls inadvertently into the tank. But we have farmers that would agitate their tanks in May, and they go back in September to when they finish it out before the close period, and they don't have to agitate again. So in general, the process improves year on year, and it peaks at about year 3, but there's a massive improvement in the first couple of months. That's when most of the work is done.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. I just, because I'm so impressed by it, and solutions, I suppose we're all about, like, would you say, have you had any contact with any agricultural businesses, or, politicians? I mean, is this in the know? Because I know there's a lot of, there's a tug of war really between regenerative agriculture and agribusiness. I mean, I've seen in loads of different ways, and, I know that the lobby groups are big in the agribusiness world, but has there been any contact or anything like that, or interest?
Yeah, Derek, there's lots of different products out there. I have some agribusinesses that are selling some of the products already. There is a move towards it. There is, I think there's a realization that we need to change what we're doing, that it's not sustainable as it is. And as in everything, there'll be resistance. At the end of the day, it has to come from farmers. Farmers have to push this, and farmers have to be the driving force behind it, because that's what will, for me, that's where I see the greatest change happening. And a lot of that is purely getting the information out there. If we can, and this is why this is fabulous. People like you that are talking to farmers, if we can put the information in front of people, or tell them where to go and find it.
Yeah.
What I see with farmers is where they had no real background or they weren't educated about soil biology, and they discover it, it's like flicking a light switch. And they really get tuned into it, and then they absolutely, farmers are tuned into soil. And it's funny, I was reading a book before Christmas that I'd highly recommend. It's a book called For the Love of Soil by Nicole Masters. And she has a page on it about the actinomyces in soil. And actinomyces is like a long strain bacterium. And in very healthy soil or compost, you can see, because it shows up as white strands. Some people mistake it for mycorrhizae, but it's not. It's actinobacteria. And human beings can detect those bacteria in soil at a dilution of 1 part in a trillion. Sharks, she says, can detect blood in water at a dilution of 1 in a billion. So human beings are 200 to 300 times more tuned in to that bacteria in soil than sharks are to that drop of blood in water. And the reason being, they're now discovering that working with soil and being exposed to that bacteria is actually a natural anti-stressor. It actually reduces your stress levels, and they're looking now at trying to isolate it as being a compound, or developing into a product that can be used to help people with PTSD. It actually helps relax the body. So human beings have a natural, we're genetically programmed to be able to pick up those bacteria in soil. We have a natural affinity towards soil. And I find out with farmers, when you help them make that connection between them, soil biology, food production, it is like flicking a light switch. And that's what makes the job very rewarding. Is because you can help people see it in a different light, and they're hungry for more information, and it does put people on a path towards maybe not regenerative farming, but definitely more sustainable in what we're doing with our soils and with our farms and with our animals.
Well, yeah, I'd say maybe more natural farming as such, because this is farming that, is traditional. You could say back in my father's time, 60 years in the farm, there were, and it's really nice that you say that it's clicking a switch, because it really is. Because almost I feel like a lot of farmers I've talked to, with the certain advice they were given, the switch was almost turned off for them, that someone else is going to do it for you. But that's why I just think this product is great, because it's almost awakening the dormant slurry, but also maybe the dormant farmer.
Yeah. And that's why it kind of has, like, I had actually that young guy that sent me the picture the day of the tank before it was agitated. Himself and his dad were out putting down fencing posts last year, and the pigtails for paddock grazing. And it was the middle of the drought, and now they're using the product 3 years. I think they're going into their 4th year this year. But they couldn't believe how easy it was to get it into the ground last year. And it took about 2 years, but they could see that difference in the soil, because structure. We're actually getting the natural structure back into the soil. We're taking the tightness out of the soil, taking the compaction out of the soil. And it was like, they were very impressed with what was happening with the slurry, but all of a sudden now they're seeing the effect that was happening on the soil. And they were blown away. They were overawed with it. And like, they're talking to their neighbours, they're telling their agriculture advisors about it, they're telling the reps that come into the yard, and because they can just see that a small little change can have a profound effect on their soil and on their operation.
Brilliant. I just have one question about the slurry. When is the best time to put it out? What do you think? I mean, because traditionally it goes out after the silage is cut. You could say it's after the grass is cut and cleared away. Like, is that good practice, or what would you think, just in your experience?
that is probably the best practice, Brita. It's not always the easiest to do. The reason I would say that is when you analyze slurry, you break it down, you'll have 20 to 25 units of nitrogen, but you could have up to 30 units of potash. Now, if you're putting that out before silage time, particularly if you're not treating it, and you're putting out, say, 2,000 gallons to the acre, you could be putting out a very bare minimum of 120 units of nutrients per acre on the ground. And that potash alone is quite potent. And if you're cutting silage, now it depends what stage you're cutting the silage at, but if you're going for very high quality silage, you will be pulling some of that potash in with you. And potash like that is not good for animal health. It's not good even for on grazing ground. That potash will basically prohibit the optimum uptake of magnesium, so you're more prone to milk fevers. But magnesium is necessary for other functions as well. So absolutely the best time is after the silage is taken, and to top that field back up again, and then you don't have the risk of that potash running into being taken up in excess by the grass itself. But if you're cutting your silage very, very late, like if you're going for say maybe a mid-June cut and you're applying your slurry in early April, I don't see that as being an issue. But I have farmers where we are trying to strike a balance between applying slurry mid-March and cutting silage the first week of May, and then going back again with slurry and cutting silage again the middle of June, cutting every 4 to 6 weeks. So what we're trying to do is reduce the rates as much as possible, give the soil time and not have too much uptake. But the best time when you're not under pressure would be after the silage is taken, you're 100%.
Yeah, because that's something that my father practices all right. But would you say a couple of times, like a couple of times a year really is optimum as well, like not in just one big go, because that's what tends to happen with contractors and getting availability and all that. And like I think the tractors, obviously, I think you noticed yourself, they've gotten heavier and bigger, and the tanks have gotten bigger, and that also adds to the compaction, doesn't it?
I have a very good customer down in Munster, and he's got a 1,550 gallon tanker, and he's had it for years, and he's clinical about how he puts out his slurry and his fertilizer. Well, actually, he's clinical about everything that he does. But he says the only time he'll ever see birds follow him in the slurry tanker is where he gets his overlaps wrong. So instead of putting 1,550 gallons to the acre on the overlaps, he'll have over 3,000 gallons to the acre. And he said it's amazing to watch. The birds will literally walk that line up the field, because that's when the worms will come up. And we have to get into our heads what effect we're having with all our practices on the soil. What effect are we having on the biology, and particularly what effect are we having on the worms? And really, for me, 2,000 gallons of slurry to the acre at any stage is more than enough to be applying, because like I said earlier on, soil is like a cow's stomach. It needs time to digest, and slurry has 120 units in 2,000 gallons. Now, if you go up to 3,000 gallons, you're up at 180 units. Soil can't digest that. And soil can't take that in efficiently. Efficiency drops. And we know, because we can see at times, particularly if soil is saturated or near saturation, we're killing earthworms. But what we're not seeing is the effect it has on biology, and it is caustic to biology. So I would much rather, like I have a customer in the north of Ireland, and he's intensive, he's indoors all year round. He puts out no bag in P or K, but he puts out slurry twice, 2 to 3 weeks apart for his first cut. And that just shows the power that's in the slurry. He doesn't need any bag nitrogen. So I would rather go twice with 2,000 gallons than once with 3 or 4. And if at all possible, I would go with even less. I think 1,500 gallons is actually more than enough on a lot of farms. If you want 1,500 gallons twice, I would rank it, Breeder, probably 4 or 5 times more efficient than going with 3,000 once. Long term, for your soil health, for everything else.
Well, that's great information, Leslie, because I'm doing the green cert at the moment, and I kind of do this series of Hedge School of Farming and things you won't learn in the green cert. but it's also good to have the conversation, using products on the farm already. Even the bag nitrogen, sure, it is only the synthetic form of what you have in the tank, isn't it?
Yeah, well, again, I try to pass this along as much as I can. If you got a properly structured soil breeder, you'll have 25% air, you'll have 25% water. And the air that we breathe is 78% nitrogen. So the air in our soil has 20% nitrogen. Now that wasn't put there by chance. That's there for a reason. And now we're starting to discover the power of biology. We can see that if we get our soil structure right, that the grasses, the plants can grow because they have the nitrogen there around them. If you get the bacterial species right, you get your fungal species right, they'll take that nitrogen and they'll convert it into form that the plant can utilize. It's not just clover can do that, grasses can do that, provided we nurture the soil properly. So yeah, we'll probably always need a little bit of the bag, but there's a lot we can do to reduce our reliance on it, and there's a lot we can do to capture what's there naturally. Our soils have lots of phosphorus locked up, our soils have a good bit of potash locked up, and again, bacteria and funguses can release those. So there's a lot you can learn. There's a lot you can learn the green cert. There's a lot you can learn outside it. But the more you expose yourself and your mind, open your mind up to biological thinking and looking up and reading and talking to people that are practicing it, the more you realize that we can do more with biology than we could ever do with chemistry, and our soils be better off, and we'll all be better off for it.
Well, yeah, thanks, Leslie. On that note, I think you've really explained it really well. I want to thank you for your time, and
thank you, Brita.
Yeah, I hope to, best of luck with I'd happily go farm to farm selling it for you. I have a saleswoman, I have a background in sales. Thanks, Leslie.
Thanks, Brita.
Thanks very much now.